Hi, and welcome to the HiveMind podcast. Every single week, we explore a new subject with an expert that's usually related to how fintechs and SaaS businesses can drive revenue forward. We have a slightly different subject this week. We're going to be talking about the role of psychometric tests and a variety of other personality profile in identifying and picking the best talent. The reason that I wanted to have the guest today on board is that as a sales leader, I always found it relatively easy to select sales talent because they were very similar to myself. However, when I entered the C-suite, I realized how important diversity was, and it was far more complex to get a cohesive management team. So today, our special guest is Emma Hatto, the co-founder and CRO of Thrive, a personality and psychometric testing company. Emma, thank you very much for joining the show.
Thanks for having me, James.
Cool. Could we kick off? Can you just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Thrive?
Yep. Thanks for the introduction. I'm Emma. I'm the co-founder and chief commercial officer at Thrive. A little bit about kind of what we do. We're essentially a people data platform. So we help small and medium-sized businesses be much more kind of objective and data-driven in the decisions that they're making about their people. You mentioned psychometrics. Kind of everything we do is underpinned by science and assessments. And kind of the real hit was that we knew that lots of large enterprise businesses were using kind of assessments when making decisions about people. But it was actually the smaller businesses that were often getting it wrong and getting very frustrated with those wrong hires, and also obviously having quite a large expense when they did kind of make bad hiring or people decisions. So we built this platform in order to be able to give those people, as I say, much more data to be able to kind of support them along the way.
So when we use the term psychometric, I'll be honest, I throw it around a little bit, but I don't really understand what it means. Like, is it personality? Is it IQ? Can you tell us a little bit about, the kinds of tests that you provide?
Yeah, so psychometrics in kind of workplace cover two things. So we assess cognition. So that's things like your verbal reasoning. And that's really assessing your kind of intelligence, your intellect, and assess personality. And it's important in the workplace that we're actually assessing job specific personality. So traits that will actually make you better at the role. We want to look at that. So that would be things like how conscientious you are, how resilient you are, kind of what your management personality is like. So actually, there's a lot of research that if you combine those two things, both ability and personality, is going to put you at the forefront of predicting someone's future job success. To throw kind of into the assessment space something else in there, and it's a really big topic at the moment, is actually looking at skills as well. So it's important to understand someone's cognition and personality, but also it's important to understand somebody's skill set. So, do they have the knowledge and the expertise to be able to do the role properly? And that's also something that we provide at Thrive, but I know that businesses are kind of looking into more and more at the moment.
Great. And so you mentioned that this is something that, larger companies have been adopting for a little while, but you work kind of more with larger companies or smaller companies. Can you kind of tell us about your customers?
Yeah, it's a real variety, but we kind of came to market with the kind of smaller businesses in mind. Often bigger businesses have been using this type of service probably for a while, but they end up being very expensive. You normally need a psychologist kind of in the process. What we wanted to be able to do is bring that same quality and that same level of science, but to businesses that just want to plug and play. So if you're about to start hiring for a new sales manager and you want to be able to use assessments, you want something that you could just use and implement now, and then get all the data and understand the results yourself. So typically businesses that need that would be working with us, but that could be a 5-person business, which is not that typical, but all the way up to say a 5,000-person business.
Great. And I mean, one of the main things that go-to-market Hive operates in is sales and marketing. So like, do you work towards like an archetypal profile, like the perfect salesperson or the perfect marketer, or are you just looking for, universal competencies?
Yeah, it's really important that when you're using these assessments that you use them in a job specific way. So if I'm hiring a head of marketing versus a SDR, for example, we know that what they need to do in the job is going to be very different. When we're writing the job description, when we're looking at CVs, we're looking for very different things. And so we want to be able to do that in assessments as well. So what we have done is a huge amount of research with our psychologists that have profiled these particular roles. So for a head of marketing, for example, they'll say, okay, they need to be good problem solvers and they need to be good communicators. And then also these are the types of personality traits that they would need to be successful, which would be very different to a SDR who's, going to need to have lots of resilience and be able to cope with those setbacks and adapt to the situation that's in front of them very quickly. So therefore the assessments that they take should be different and should show us different data. And then from a kind of hiring manager perspective, obviously what we care about is very different. So we'd want to be able to see kind of the ideal data for that role rather than just a load of different personality traits that we don't really care about or feel irrelevant to that job that we're hiring for.
So there are archetypes, but there are also kind of client specific requirements that you fold into what you're looking at.
Yeah, so we will always guide you by saying, okay, a head of marketing or head of sales needs this particular traits to be successful. And we know that if they have these traits, they will be successful. However, every business is different and every team is different. And so you, as the person hiring, will know that you also need certain personalities or certain kind of abilities within that role. And therefore you should be able to customize that further to be able to make sure it's relevant to you.
Okay. And does Thrive operate like purely as I suppose a part of the new candidate evaluation, or do you work with existing employees as well?
Yeah, both, and assessment should definitely be used in both ways. It's, I think, in the hiring side, it's very easy when you don't have any idea of a candidate, especially in days like now where people are using ChatGPT to build their CVs based on the job description. We just can't rely on what we receive from a candidate and the kind of traditional methods. So we need to be able to use objective data assessments to be able to kind of support what this candidate is saying in an interview process. So when you don't know that person, you've never met them, all you can see is a CV, it's a really good way to be able to get a much better understanding of their intellect, their personality, their knowledge and skills. But then when you think about your current employees, they're such a big part of every business. But if you can't measure those people, then how do you ever improve them? And businesses really struggle to understand the employees that they have. Like, what is it that makes them tick? Like, why is that person really good at sales? Why is this person kind of struggling in this particular way? And again, as a manager, if you don't know that stuff, how do you improve it? So what we do internally is we, again, run assessments to understand the makeup of our team. And that will then help you, again, as a leader, to be able to say, okay, this is the makeup of my team. This is my strengths within that team. These are my areas of development, weaknesses, and this is what I should now do to be able to kind of make those improvements. And that's a really difficult thing to do if you don't run an assessment on the team. So they should absolutely be used in both ways, and they should feed into one another. If I have a team that's lacking commercial growth, which hopefully I don't, then I need to be able to find candidates that have strong commercial growth. And so once I know that gap, I can start filling that gap by, one, developing my current employees, and two, hiring people that have those traits that are missing within that team.
Great. And I think one area that for me is personally fascinating is the chemistry of leadership teams. I mean, this is just my bias, but it feels like those differences become far more important. And just to give you an example of that, you want to have complementary, if you have the same complementary skills, then you also probably share the same weaknesses. Like, how would you, like, if someone was looking to fill like a really important role, say it's a chief operating officer, would you take a baseline from the other executive members, so you're kind of building that profile based on their weaknesses? Or again, is it just kind of based on the role of the best COO as an isolated data set?
Yeah, I think it's very good to have a diverse group of people, whether that's the leadership team or a team in general. So it shouldn't matter if people have different personality traits. It's about how you lean into those personality traits. So there is no point hiring a COO that has strengths in a particular area if you're not actually going to use that area to be able to continue within the business. So you need to be able to find ways that complement each other, and you should absolutely not hire people just based on what is successful in your current team. You need people that are going to bring other strengths that aren't there, and especially in a leadership team. So although it's good to kind of have a makeup of the ideal person within your business, that doesn't mean that they're going to be the ideal COO kind of long term. So you should certainly be looking to fill those gaps within the organization.
Yeah. And at what point does it make sense for a company to engage you? I mean, is there, if you're 5 people and you're kind of like a seed level business, is that too early, or is it valuable then? Like what is a good stage for a young company to start considering this? And also, what would you say is like a good entry point? Do you kind of start people, do you introduce them kind of softly to the concept, or?
Yeah, good question. So it really doesn't matter what size business you are to use this. It really depends on what's happening in your business. So if you keep hiring people and they don't last, then obviously you have a problem. And so you need to be able to find a way to fix that problem. And that is likely that your bias is kind of creeping into the process. You're hiring people from the wrong sources, and you're just making decisions to like fill seats essentially, and that's costing you a lot of money because you keep getting that wrong. If that's a problem that you have, then using assessments for the 1 or 2 candidates that you might have coming through in that year is absolutely fine. That's going to help you make those better hiring decisions. If you're a business that's not performing, or you just feel that you have no understanding of your people, then again, whether you're 5 or 5,000, it doesn't matter. You can use this to be able to kind of understand the people. I think the ideal way to do this is, first of all, find out the makeup of your team. So what are the personality traits that your team have, and what are your strengths and weaknesses within the business and within those particular teams? Once you know that, you can then use that data to be able to kind of help you aid your kind of hiring decisions going forward. And so that's kind of the ideal situation. But yeah, if you're just hiring a couple of people, it's a really good way to kind of get started. And I think in terms of sales and marketing roles, if we kind of bring it back to that, they tend to be the most difficult roles to hire for because we get great people in interviews. And you said kind of right at the beginning, you hire people based on what was good. And that's great, but it probably didn't work 100% of the time, I'm sure. And also we don't want people that are like us all the time. We want people that come from different backgrounds, that have different ideas, different knowledge, different skill sets. And so therefore, using these types of assessments for those types of roles, even if that's what you do just to get started, will really then enhance that kind of objectivity in your process, and you'll see that you'll end up with a much more kind of diverse team as well.
It's a really interesting point though about the value of diversity, and actually, rather than being an expert in psychometric, I'd love to tap into your experience as a co-founder. Do you think that diversity is always a good thing? I mean, I'll lay my cards on the table. I know that diversity has a value, but in very, very young companies, sometimes it feels like harmony is more advantageous. Like, I mean, I'm talking about when you're a handful of people. So I don't know. What are your thoughts to that statement?
I think it depends what we're talking about when we say diversity. Yeah. Really, I am a true believer that having a diverse workforce is a much better. It's much better for the business.
Yeah, sorry to clarify for the audience. I'm talking about diversity of how people think, not their skin color or sexuality.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, of course, great. But no, I think it's good to have different personality traits. And actually, having built this team that I have right now, I didn't hire people that were the same. I hired people that had different personality traits and different strengths and different weaknesses, and that's worked really well because as they've worked together, they've brought out each other's, where the weaknesses were for one person, that's now become a strength. So I don't think having 5 minds that all work in the same way at the beginning of a startup is the right thing to do.
Yeah, fair. And kind of back to the psychometrics process, like one of the things that I was actually I was engaged in a LinkedIn conversation the other day was a candidate talking about like how insanely onerous the interviewing process had become. I think it was like 8 interviews, and it was quite painful. Like, what is the kind of the ask from a candidate's time to go through the kind of processes that we're talking about here?
Yeah, and it's one of the key things that we think about here at Thrive. And if you're ever thinking about using assessments, you should always ask the provider that question, because we know that it's really difficult to find the right people in the first place. So we don't want to make that candidate journey really difficult and long. We want to make it as quickly as possible. So the first thing about assessments is if you introduce them, you don't need to have as many steps in your process, because you don't need 10 people to give their opinion on that candidate, because the data is saying this person is the right fit. However, these are the areas that have been flagged by the assessments, and this is what you should do in the interview. Ask these questions, and you'll get to know this candidate better. So it's helping the candidate by bringing the kind of number of interviews down. But also the experience must be good. So as a candidate, you have to be able to take an assessment on your mobile these days. You have to be able to kind of be able to understand the instructions very clearly. Whether you're in the US, or India, it shouldn't matter. You should be able to go through this kind of same experience. So I'd say typically, for us, if you're asking candidates to take an assessment, it's going to take them around 20 to 30 minutes. But if you're commuting to an interview to go and meet somebody, that's less time than it would be to kind of meet them face to face. So yes, but you certainly wouldn't want your candidates going through hours of assessments at this stage, because they're just gonna drop off and you're going to lose them.
Yeah. And in terms of, I suppose, the role of individual contributors versus kind of leadership, where do you see the most value? I mean, maybe it's in both, but do you think there's kind of one group where, the benefits are stronger?
I think that it should be used for every role. And I think if you're bringing assessments into the business, there should be consistency there, and you should use them for all roles. I think with leadership, you would expect the skills and knowledge to be there, but you don't necessarily know that person's going to be the right personality fit for the organization. And so that's often where it goes wrong in leadership roles. When you make those hires, or you've got somebody that's the wrong leader within the business, you need to be able to identify that. Individual contributors, it goes without saying, and I talked about kind of the interview process. I've sat in so many interviews where I thought that person is the person I'm going to hire, and then the psychometric assessments tell me something completely different, and then I can use that to kind of make a better decision. So I think it should be used for both. I think it should be used in different ways. I wouldn't be asking, if I was hiring a new COO, I wouldn't be asking them right at the beginning of the process to take an assessment. I'd get to know them, kind of probably sell them into the business a little bit and then ask them to do it. Whereas, if I'm hiring a junior salesperson, it's the first thing I would be asking them to complete.
Yeah, great. And so if there's anyone listening here that's thinking, well, that sounds interesting, like, what would you say for anyone that's perhaps been considering this in the back of their mind but didn't quite know how to take it forward? What would your recommendations to them?
I would say take one role or one team and give it a go, because I think what people don't understand, or they're kind of wary about, is the data that they're going to get back. And I think once you see what you receive, and you can see that it's going to help your team perform better, it's going to help your team stay more engaged, because you're actually showing that you care about their development plans and what their future looks like within the business. It's going to help with succession planning and understanding who in your team could be a future leader. And it's definitely going to help you with costs when it comes to hiring. What we, especially at Thrive, it's not an expensive tool, but it's going to save you. I think we save sort of £30,000 to £50,000 for one bad hire, by the time you think about all the time that goes into it, any recruitment fees that you pay, etc. So yeah, take one role, take one team, give it a go, see what the data is telling you, and then then decide whether it's something you want to roll out across the business.
Fantastic. Emma, thank you so much for joining us today. If anyone's listening and wants to reach out to Emma, how can people reach you, Emma?
Yeah, I'm at emma@thrivetech.co. Also on LinkedIn as Emma Hatto at Thrive. I think I'm one of the only Emma Hattos on LinkedIn, so you should be able to find me nice and easily.
Wonderful. Emma, thanks again. Great to talk to you.